On a quiet Saturday afternoon in October 1956, Elvis Presley walked into Charlie's music store in downtown Memphis to buy guitar strings and ended up facing the most musically gifted child he'd ever encountered. 8-year-old Marcus Washington sat in the corner of the store playing classical guitar with such incredible skill that Elvis stopped dead in his tracks, convinced he was listening to a recording. When the boy looked up and boldly challenged the king of rock and roll to a guitar contest right there in the store, what followed wasn't just a musical showdown. It was a lesson in humility, mentorship, and the discovery that sometimes the greatest teachers come in the smallest packages. But let me tell you how an 8-year-old boy with calloused fingers and fearless confidence managed to humble Elvis Presley and change both their lives forever. Because this encounter would prove that real musical greatness isn't about fame or recognition. It's about pure talent meeting genuine heart. Elvis was at the height of his early success in October 1956. Don't Be Cruel and Hound Dog were topping the charts. Ed Sullivan had finally booked him for his show. And everywhere Elvis went, he was mobbed by screaming fans. He'd grown accustomed to being treated like a musical phenomenon, to having his talent praised and his abilities celebrated by everyone he met. That Saturday afternoon, Elvis needed to replace a broken string on his Martin acoustic guitar before a recording session the next week. He'd chosen Charlie's music store specifically because it was small, tucked away on a side street, and the kind of place where he could shop without being recognized and surrounded by fans. Charlie's was the kind of old-fashioned music store that was becoming rare even in 1956. Cramped aisles lined with instruments, sheet music scattered on counters, the smell of wood polish and old leather cases. Charlie Hendricks, the 60-year-old owner, had been selling instruments to Memphis musicians for 30 years and treated everyone the same, whether they were famous or just starting out. When Elvis walked in wearing sunglasses and a simple jacket, Charlie glanced up from behind the counter with a nod of recognition, but didn't make a fuss. That was one of the reasons Elvis liked the store. Charlie understood that sometimes musicians just wanted to be customers, not celebrities. "Afternoon, Elvis. What can I do for you today?" "Need some strings for my Martin, Charlie. High E string snapped during practice yesterday." As Charlie went to get the strings, Elvis browsed the store, running his hands along guitar necks, admiring a beautiful sunburst Gibson, checking out the harmonicas displayed near the cash register. The store was quiet, except for one sound that gradually captured his attention, the most exquisite classical guitar playing he'd ever heard. The music was coming from the back corner of the store, where someone was playing a complex piece that sounded like it belonged in a concert hall, not a small music shop. The fingerpicking was precise and lightning fast, the melody was hauntingly beautiful, and the technique was absolutely flawless. Elvis assumed it was a recording playing through hidden speakers, but as he listened more carefully, he realized the music had the subtle variations and living quality of a live performance. Someone in the store was actually playing this incredible piece. Elvis followed the sound to the back corner and found its source. A small African-American boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting on a wooden stool with a 3/4 size classical guitar that was still almost too big for his small frame. The child's eyes were closed in concentration, his small fingers moving across the fretboard with the precision of a master, completely lost in the music he was creating. Elvis stood transfixed, watching this child play with a technical skill that rivaled any professional guitarist he'd ever heard. The boy was performing what Elvis later learned was Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, a piece that would challenge even experienced classical players, and he was playing it from memory with perfect technique and genuine musical expression. When the boy finished the piece and opened his eyes, he looked up to find Elvis Presley staring at him with amazement. "That was incredible," Elvis said quietly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The boy studied Elvis's face with the serious expression that some children have when they're trying to figure out if an adult is being genuine or just condescending. "My grandmother taught me," the boy replied. "She used to play in church before her arthritis got bad. Now she teaches me instead of playing herself." "How long have you been playing?" 3 years, since I was 5. The boy's voice carried no boastfulness, just matter-of-fact honesty about his abilities. Charlie Hendricks appeared beside Elvis, holding the guitar strings. "Elvis, meet Marcus Washington. He comes in here every Saturday while his grandmother does shopping. I let him practice on the instruments as long as he's careful with them." "Marcus," Elvis said, crouching down to the boy's level. "I've been playing guitar for about 10 years, and I've never heard anyone play that piece so beautifully. You've got a real gift." Marcus tilted his head, studying Elvis more carefully. "You play guitar, too? What kind of music?" Elvis smiled. "Rock and roll, mostly. Country, some gospel. Different from what you play, but I love it just the same." "Want to hear you play something?" Marcus said with the direct honesty that children use when they're genuinely curious. "I've never heard rock and roll guitar up close." Elvis looked around the store. Besides Charlie, there were only 2 other customers, both browsing quietly and paying no attention to the conversation in the back corner. "Well," Elvis said, reaching for one of the store's acoustic guitars, "I suppose I could play a little something." He settled onto another stool and tuned the guitar quickly, then launched into "That's All Right," the song that had started his recording career. Elvis played it simply, the way he had in the early days at Sun's studio, just guitar and voice, letting the rhythm and melody carry the song. When he finished, Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this completely different style of music. "That's good," Marcus said with the serious evaluation of someone who understood music deeply. "You've got good rhythm, and your voice has nice tone, but your fingerpicking could use some work." Elvis blinked, taken aback by the child's blunt assessment. When was the last time someone had criticized his guitar playing? When was the last time anyone had suggested he needed improvement in any aspect of his music? "My fingerpicking could use work," Elvis repeated, not sure whether to be amused or offended. "Yeah," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "You mostly play chords and simple patterns, but guitar can do a lot more than that. Want me to show you?" Without waiting for an answer, Marcus took the guitar and began playing "That's All Right" in a style Elvis had never heard before. The boy maintained the essential rhythm and melody of the rock and roll song, but he played it with classical fingerpicking technique, adding intricate harmonies and counter melodies that transformed the simple tune into something complex and beautiful. Elvis listened with his mouth slightly open, watching this 8-year-old child take his signature song and play it better than he could. "See," Marcus said when he finished, "same song, but you can make the guitar do more work if you know how." "Marcus," Elvis said slowly, "how would you like to have a little musical contest? Just for fun." Marcus's eyes lit up with interest. "What kind of contest?" "We each pick a song and play it our way. Then we try to play each other's songs, see what we can learn from each other." Charlie Hendricks had stopped what he was doing and was watching this interaction with fascination. The 2 other customers had also noticed that something interesting was happening and had drifted closer to listen. "You want to have a guitar contest with me?" Marcus asked, as if he wanted to make sure he understood correctly. "Why not? I might learn something. Might teach you something too." Marcus considered this proposition seriously. "Okay, but I get to pick your song, and you get to pick mine. That makes it more fair." Elvis laughed, delighted by this child's confidence. "Fair enough. What song do you want me to try?" "Bach's Air on the G string. It's not as hard as what I was playing before, but you'll need to use fingerpicking, not just chords." Elvis felt a flutter of anxiety. He'd heard the piece before, but he'd never tried to play classical music on guitar. "And what song do you want to try?" "How about that song you just played, but I want to play it the way you play it. Just chords and rhythm, no fancy fingerpicking." If you're amazed by this 8-year-old's confidence in challenging Elvis Presley, please hit that subscribe button. What happened next would humble the king of rock and roll and create an unlikely mentorship that changed both their lives, and there are more incredible stories about unexpected musical moments coming. Marcus went first, playing "That's All Right" in Elvis's simple rhythmic style. It was clearly outside his comfort zone. He was used to complex fingerpicking and sophisticated harmonies, so stripping the song down to basic chords and rhythm patterns was actually challenging for him. But he approached it with the same seriousness he brought to Bach, working to understand the essence of rock and roll guitar playing. When he finished, Elvis applauded. "That was good, Marcus. You really captured the feel of it, even though it's not your usual style." "Your turn," Marcus said, handing over the guitar. Elvis took the instrument and attempted to play Air on the G string. It was immediately clear that he was out of his depth. The fingerpicking patterns required for classical guitar were completely different from what he was used to, and the melody demanded a level of precision and independence between fingers that he'd never developed. He stumbled through about 30 seconds of the piece before stopping with a frustrated laugh. "I can't do it," he admitted. "That's way harder than it looks." "It's okay," Marcus said kindly. "Classical guitar is different. It takes time to learn the fingerpicking. But you want me to show you some easier patterns?" For the next hour, Elvis Presley sat in the back corner of Charlie's music store, receiving guitar lessons from an 8-year-old boy. Marcus showed him basic fingerpicking patterns, taught him how to play melody and bass lines simultaneously, and patiently corrected his finger positioning when he tried to rush through the exercises. "Don't use your fingernails," Marcus instructed. "Use your fingertips, and keep your wrists straight, not bent." Elvis found himself taking direction from this child with more openness than he'd shown to any adult music teacher. There was something about Marcus's genuine love for the instrument and his complete lack of ego that made it easy to accept his instruction. As the afternoon wore on, a small crowd had gathered in the store. Word had somehow spread that Elvis Presley was having a guitar lesson with a kid, and people had come to see this unusual sight. But the audience didn't feel intrusive. Everyone was witnessing two musicians sharing their knowledge and passion for music. When Marcus's grandmother arrived to collect him, she found her grandson teaching one of the most famous musicians in America how to fingerpick. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she asked, not recognizing Elvis but seeing her grandson with an adult stranger. "Grandmama, this is Elvis. He plays rock and roll, but I'm teaching him classical techniques. He's a good student." Elvis stood up and extended his hand. "Ma'am, I'm Elvis Presley. Your grandson is incredibly talented. He's been teaching me things about guitar I never knew." Marcus's grandmother, Sarah Washington, was a dignified woman in her 60s who had spent years teaching piano and guitar in her community. She looked at Elvis with the assessment of someone who understood both music and people. "Mr. Presley," she said, "Marcus has a gift, but he doesn't often get to share his music with people who understand it. Thank you for taking time to listen." "Ma'am, he's the one who taught me something today. Your grandson has skills that put me to shame, and he was generous enough to share them." That afternoon at Charlie's music store began a friendship that lasted for years. Elvis arranged for Marcus to receive formal classical guitar instruction from the best teachers in Memphis and made sure he had access to quality instruments. More importantly, Elvis became a regular visitor to the Washington family home, not as a celebrity making a charitable gesture, but as a genuine friend who loved music. He'd show up on Saturday afternoons, always ready to learn something new from his young teacher. Marcus learned to appreciate different styles of music. Elvis introduced him to gospel, country, and blues, showing him how emotion and storytelling could be as important as technical precision. The encounter changed how Elvis approached his own learning. He began studying with other musicians more seriously, approaching music with the same humble curiosity that Marcus had shown him that day. Have you ever met a young person whose natural talent or fresh perspective taught you something you thought you already knew? Someone who reminded you that learning never stops, regardless of your age or experience. Tell us about them in the comments. Let's celebrate the young teachers who humble us with their gifts. If this story reminded you that the best learning happens when ego steps aside and curiosity takes over, make sure you're subscribed for more incredible stories about unexpected mentors and musical discoveries. Hit that notification bell for stories about the moments when masters become students. The most important thing that happened in Charlie's music store that day wasn't the guitar lesson or even the musical challenge. It was the moment when Elvis Presley, at the height of his fame and confidence, allowed himself to be taught by a child, to admit he didn't know everything, and to approach learning with the same openness and enthusiasm that had made him successful in the first place. Sometimes our greatest teachers don't come with credentials or recognition. They come with small fingers that can make music most adults can't imagine, with honest assessments that cut through ego and pretense, and with the generous hearts of children who believe that sharing knowledge is more important than hoarding it. That Saturday afternoon, an 8-year-old boy reminded the king of rock and roll that in music, as in life, there's always more to learn if you're humble enough to listen.